camera's wiggling a lot. Hello, hello, and welcome. Now, if you're interested in learning acrylic painting, you're in the right place. I'm Jessie Robertson, and this is Keep It Colorful. Today, we are painting Autumn Book Club. This painting has beautiful modeled forms, loose painterly brushwork, and enough juicy details to zone into and really paint the hours away. I'll show you how to capture the three-dimensional form of the pumpkin using shadows, midtones, and highlights. We'll draw this realistic stack of books and painterly autumn leaves. And we're going to work with rich reds, oranges, blues, and very warm, earthy colors to capture that feeling of autumn. Now, we do have 2 new classes coming your way every single weekend. So if you would like to stay up to date, you can actually create a free account over on our website. That's where you can watch our weekend tutorials. You can share your painting when you're finished. And best of all, you can ask questions right underneath each class. And underneath each class too, I also post color mixing guides for you after class, so you can see the exact color mixes that I make. Now, if you find a class that you absolutely love, you can tip to own it for lifetime access as well, or you can join our Kick Academy and unlock our entire library of more than 650 step-by-step painting classes, along with painting challenges and plenty of ways to keep your brushes going. If you're ready to settle in, grab your brushes, grab a stack of books, and let's go over our supplies. All right, first and foremost, you're going to need something to paint on, and today I'm working on a size 11 by 14 inch stretched canvas. While I do upload all of my color swatches and the recipes we use to make each color, I highly encourage you to grab a small watercolor book. This one's just 7 by 10 inches. That way you can create your own color mixes and label them for you to have. It's a wonderful reference, and it will really help reinforce all of the color mixing that you learn and that we go over together in each class. And speaking of colors, we have some beautiful warm and cool hues going into today's project. Those include ultramarine blue, phthalo blue. We'll be using a bit of green, and today I'm using some Hooker's green. Into the warm hues, we have some cadmium red, medium hue, some cadmium orange, medium hue. Let's grab ourselves some burnt sienna, burnt umber, cadmium yellow medium, as well as titanium white. Along with those brushes, you're going to need a big old jar of water, and then you'll also want to have some paper towel or an old rag for cleaning and drying your brushes off along the way. And for those brushes, I have quite a few brushes here, and with a painting like this, I think it's nice to have a lot of options. For instance, when doing the leaves, you could use one of those little rectangular brushes, or you could use an angled shader brush, and you might just use one, but I wanted to grab a few different brushes, especially when getting into the loose and painterly leaves. Because you'll find a certain brush might give you a better feel for creating these leaves than others. But these are the ones that I used, and I'm going to hold them up close so that you can approximate the bristle shape and size, including a big number 12 flat. And just for reference, this brush is about 3/4 of an inch wide. So the number 12 flat brush. I also want you to grab a number 6 bright brush, and a bright brush is just a little bit more square, like it's shorter than a flat brush. A number 6 bright. Then we have some little round brushes for getting points and details. Here's 2 round brushes. I have a big number 6 round and a little, grab a number 1 or a number 0 round. This one says it's a number 1, but it's so nice and small, it reminds me of a lot of my other number 0 rounds. So 2 pointy brushes, a little something like this. Now into more of those detail brushes, the smaller brushes. Grab for me a 1/4 inch flat. If you use the Princeton brushes like I do, that's a number 4 or a number 6 flat brush. If you have 1 or 2 wisp brushes that have little segments cut into them, these are really fun to play with in today's painting. I also have a 1/4 inch angled shader, which is like a flat brush, but it's got a bit of an angle. This can be really lovely for creating some of the points on our leaves, on our fall leaves. And I also grabbed a few fan brushes. I love fan brushes. I'm going to be working with 3 today. Even if you just have 1, grab whatever fan brush you have. But I'm going to show you 3 that I use in almost every painting. Number 1 is a bristle fan. This is actually a fan brush from the oil painting section of the art store. It gives really lovely texture. It's great for scrubbing and blending large fields of color. So a bristle fan. I also have an acrylic fan, which is just a bit softer. So it has softer blending capabilities than that bristly fan. I also have my little tiny fan brush. This is an Artist Loft brand brush. It's the size 10-0. It fits inside my thumb. It's so cute and handy for smaller spaces like books and pumpkins. Now that's it for brushes. We are going to do, to place this stack of books, I want to make sure that you've got them in perspective. So grab for me a ruler. Also handy for painting in just a few of the straight lines on top, which will really help clean up our books. So grab a ruler. I love a metal ruler. You can also grab these little small metal rulers. You can see I use this one for painting more than drawing. Just grab a metal ruler, and then you'll want something to sketch on the background with. And you have some options for sketching on the canvas. You could use just a regular pencil like this, or you can also use watercolor pencil. So this is a Faber-Castell watercolor pencil. The color, this is a burnt umber color. You don't have to erase the watercolor pencil. It just blends right into the background, which is lovely. All right, that's all of our main supplies. A few more things that will make our painting a little bit more easy today, or more fluid, is a spray bottle. I'm painting on just some glass palettes. And instead of shelling out money for a glass palette, I actually just use cutting boards because they're so sturdy. I turn them so the shiny side up, and I reuse the same cutting boards for like a lifetime. Like I haven't bought new ones. I've been painting on these for years. The paint can dry out on that cutting board. So I like to get a spray bottle and just lightly mist the top of my acrylics every 15 minutes or so. Or if you're somewhere very dry, you can mist them a bit more frequently. And that just keeps those paints workable for hours and hours and hours. Now, the spray bottle keeps the paints wet, but sometimes we might have a thick, juicy layer on our canvas and we want to get going to the next step. So if you're busy or just want to keep moving, having a little travel-sized blow dryer where you can blow dry the top layer of your painting is really lovely way to save time. And acrylics dry fast, but you got say 10 to 15 minutes per layer. You've got 3 to 4 layers. Sometimes you can be waiting an hour for that to dry. So that blow dryer can really save some time. All right, that's it for supplies. So let's go ahead and let's get started with step 1. We are going to begin by plotting out our drawing here. So what I want you to do is I want you to sketch a 3x3 grid onto your substrate. So we're working on a size 11 by 14 inch today. So I'm going to line up my ruler on the short side of my canvas between, 1 and 11 or 0 and 11 like this. And the dimension for cutting this into thirds here is actually 3.5 inches. And then come up, count 1, 2, 3 more little tick marks. I think inches are 16ths. So 3.5 inches and then 3 more 16ths. And we're going to do that one more time. 3.5 inches plus 1, 2, 3 more little tick marks. And just to be sure, I always measure the last one. Just to make sure. It's easy to muck up a measurement. And if you don't measure that last one, you won't catch it. Now, my ruler's only 12 inches long. So I'm going to do my next measurements a little bit lower down so that my ruler can reach right across. And just the same across the top, small side. 3.5 inches, 1, 2, 3 little tick marks. And then when you're ready, you can sketch up vertically. Now give or take a few millimeters here. If you're off a little bit, it's all good. This is just to generally help the placement, okay? Now take your time with these vertical thirds, and then when you're ready, we're gonna come down the long side of our substrate. So you're gonna line it up. This side is 14 inches. So to divide this into thirds, you're gonna come down 4.5 inches and then 3 more little tick marks. So again, this time you're gonna go 4.5 inches plus 3 more little tick marks. And then always measure that last one just to make sure. Do this down the other side. Take your time because I'm going to place a little grid on the other one as well. So let's get our grids on. We do everything live here. Nice and slow. I like to be slow on purpose. So that we can really zone in and take our time. Okay, once we have our grid on there, we're going to grab our pencil, and I'm just going to use a regular pencil here. We're going to start sketching this in. Now this third's a little harder to see because there's so much going on. So I'm just going to lay these little sticks here. We can see these ones a little better. There we go. So we're actually going to begin by sketching on our pumpkin. And I just wanted to show you this section here. If I cut this little section in half, you can see that the pumpkin doesn't quite hit the side here. And if I come into the center and I cut this one in half, you can see that the pumpkin actually comes over halfway here. The pumpkin also sits pretty much right halfway through the center. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come to the center square. Come here with me, and let's kind of cut it in half like this. And then let's cut this in half again. And let's cut this one in half vertically as well. Okay. So our pumpkin comes a little bit past this one. So this will be like the far side and not quite to this half here. So here. And then I'm going to just draw a little oval shape. This is like a small gourd. So you can see that it fills a little bit more than halfway over into the center and doesn't quite reach halfway through this one. So we're just going to do a little round shape to start. It can be a bit flatter on the bottom to begin, like this. Okay. And that's the only shape we're going to do for our pumpkin for now. Next, we're going to come into the books, and let's just go through these books one step at a time. And what I want you to observe is the first two books sit in, like if we look at the center third, they come right down to this line here. They're mostly straight across, maybe ever so slightly on an angle down, but very slight. And we're going to start our books just a little bit under the pumpkin. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come just below my pumpkin. I'm going to come mostly straight across. And these books, if I kind of cut this side of thirds kind of straight down like this, before they kind of bend up where the pages are, so let's just draw the first book. So I'm going to start just below the pumpkin. I'm going to create kind of a rectangle like this. And pretty much right at the halfway point, or just a little before, is where the books curve up. So we're going to create this long rectangle shape, maybe kind of coming out a little bit like this. And then right around the halfway shape, let's close this rectangle up, kind of like this to start. And then we're going to create an angle like this. And whatever angle you create here, that's going to be on the other side of the pumpkin too. And then you can imagine you're kind of closing up. So here's like the top cover of the book. This is the spine of the book. And then if we match this angle here like this, okay, now we also have the pages of the book. So this is basically like one long rectangle, then angle it up. Okay, and the pages of this book, let's just close it up kind of flat to start like this. Okay, so if we could see through our pumpkin with X-ray vision, might look a little something like this. And instead of being flat here, I'm just going to do a little kind of circle like this. And this is sort of the most complicated book and the only one that we can really see the top of it. The next book is going to follow this book. It kind of stops just before this line. I'm going to follow straight across to here. And again, it might just peek out a little bit on the other side. Instead of a straight rectangle, you can round the edges of it like this. Okay. About at halfway, it's where it's going to bend up. And we'll close this up to about the same spot as the other book. But instead of a hard rectangle, the spine's curved. So let's do a little curve like this. So these first two books are a little bit similar in how they're angled. Now don't forget, you can pause this tutorial anytime. So now what we're going to do, this next book below, and I'm just going to move this third up a little so we can see the top of it there. This book comes out a little bit further than these ones do. It's a little bit bigger. So I'm going to start it pretty much right at this line here. And I'm going to bring it out a little bit past. I'm going to bring it out to say right here. And I'm going to do the same thing. It's a little bit bigger on this side, like it sticks out a bit further. It's going to come straight across and it's going to say stop about here. This book's on a little bit of a different angle than these other ones. So I want you to pay attention to here. So I've brought it out. So these books end, like right here. This one ends here. So what I want you to do now is take your pencil right at this corner here. And we're just going to bring the angle to the corner, a little something like this. So it's on a bit more of a steep angle kind of coming back, this book. And I want you to imagine if we had X-ray vision, so this angle that's coming back, that's going to be on the other side of the book. And if we could see through, this book would kind of be like a rectangle like this, but with angled sides. So each of the sides, you just see a little bit of the edge kind of poking through here. Okay. And then we're going to close this one up again vertically like this. So there's this book here. So it's sticking out a little bit. And from here, we're going to have our first turned book. We're going to have this book below right here, where instead of the pages being to the side, this book is kind of shifted right here. So both of these sides are on a little bit more of an angle. So what I like to do, so I don't make too much of an angle, like just look at this little line. I just look at this little line right here, this little angle, and the top of the book right here, which kind of sits just under the edge of this one here. And where does this book, this is kind of the corner of the book where the pages meet the spine of the book here. If I were to kind of cut this rectangle halfway down, so I'm going to continue right in this rectangle. Let's cut it halfway down with our pencil. It looks like it turns just a little bit to the left of the center line and not too far down. It's like my pinky's pretty small, so just maybe like a pinky width down and just to the left. So then I'm going to come in from the edge of the spine here a little bit, like say here. And I'm going to do a little angle down And then I want to draw the other side coming up. And I'm going to extend it out a little bit. So we've got this little angle like this. So here's halfway. I'm just to the left of it. And from this corner here, you're going to draw, let's draw straight down to start. And this is going to determine the width of the book. Remember, the spine of this book isn't on the front, it's coming off here. So whatever angle this is, and you can imagine it coming right through the book. And if it helps, you can draw the line back all the way through like you had X-ray vision. And you know, the book is rectangular, so we want to make sure that this line is parallel to this line. It's not like coming in or it's not coming wide. This is essentially going to make a rectangular book. So the book is the same width all the way through. So I want to make sure my lines are parallel. And you can draw really light and then darken the lines if you like. And we're going to have a bit of a curve to the spine. So now this is the spine of our book. We just see a bit of the corner of the book, you know, coming through right. This is the top of the book. This is the corner of the book. And once again, when I do this line, I want it to be parallel to this one. So here, I'm going to come up, brought it out a little bit. And then once again, when we close these up, it's always straight. So even if it comes out a bit further, it's straight. Could be a little wonky, you know, how the pages of books kind of change a little bit. Okay, but largely straight up and down at the edges. So now this is the part with the pages. And if I were to darken the book on top of it, it might even be kind of coming over the edge a little bit here. In fact, when we paint this book in, we're going to do a little shape like this on the pages, where this book, it's casting a little shadow on the pages below, and that's going to add to the sense of realism. If I pull this drawing back, you can actually see that shadow right here on this turned book, and a little shadow on the one below. Okay, so we've done our first turned book. Not too bad. We have one more line to do. It's just a little line, and depending on your particular book stack, you might see this or you might not. But here's the spine of the book here on this angle. We can see a little bit of the corner of this book too. So I want to kind of make sure that even though it's just a little corner, that it's kind of coming back at the appropriate angle. So the angle of this line, even though it's way over here, needs to match the angle of that line. Again, if we had X-ray vision, okay, this book is a little bigger, so these lines meet. Even though it's just the corner, we want to make sure it matches. There are two more books, and these ones, the lower one largely gets covered by the leaves, but it still peeks through. Here I have another version of this painting here. So you can see this kind of green and leather book and this blue one. They're down below. Now these ones are turned in another direction still. So instead of these ones are all mostly straight with the pages angling up. This one's turned so that we see mostly pages here, and it's kind of turned on an angle this way. Now these ones are the only ones that really angle down, and we see a bit of the top of the book here. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. I always like looking at kind of the angle of the spine, and most importantly, kind of where this angle meets this one, because we end up with this junction point and this little bit of negative space, which is kind of just like a triangle right here. And the nice thing about this triangle is it sits pretty much exactly on this third right here, where the spine of the book and the pages of the book meet. So I'm going to be like, okay, again, just about a pinky's width down. Let's come to this line here, okay, and about a pinky's width down, let's do a little dot like this. Okay, so this is where the pages kind of come up on this sort of angle like this. And then the spine of the book is going to be on a nice angle like this. And when I draw the spine of the book up, the other thing I want you to notice is we've got a little wedge. So here's the spine of the book above it right here. I'm going to draw it dark so you can see this little wedge of white space here. So I drew up on an angle enough though that I could leave that little wedge of space there. And then I'm going to match the angle coming, the lines parallel, coming down, and close the book up at the end. Then all we have to do to finish this book is take a look at this angle here and match it at this little part of the book that's coming through. So if we could see through, you know, this book would be a little rectangle like this. And the nice thing is the book below it pretty much just follows the same formula. Kind of comes down on an angle. Could make it a little longer. And then pull up. Little rectangle here like this. Okay. Again, this bottom book gets covered by leaves, but it does show through. So I want to make sure that we can see the whole stack. And you might choose to have less leaves than me or omit the leaves. And if that's the case, then you definitely want to make sure you're showing the bottom book. I want to encourage you to take your time and also to pause the video whenever you need to zone in. Okay. Once you have your books on, we're going to move on up and into our pumpkin. So the pumpkin stem is coming off of the pumpkin just to the left of this line in our grid here. So let's come to this line in our grid here, and let's come into our pumpkin just a little bit to the left of that, like this. It should be roughly in the center. So if you cut your pumpkin in half, if yours is placed in a different way, just make sure you cut it in half. That should be where the stem is coming off, okay? If yours is a similar size to mine, it's going to be just a bit to the left of this grid line here. Okay, and then we're going to create the look of a nubbly bubbly pumpkin. I love nubbly bubbly pumpkins, and let's create one now. We can start with a stem, and I like having a little quirky stem, like a little something a little wider at the bottom. Maybe a little something like this. The adorable stem is half the fun of choosing a pumpkin. So this one's kind of curving up and over. You could go straight up. Trust your intuition here. And then, so this straight line is essentially the center of the pumpkin. And this line is going to be mostly straight here. So what I want you to do is then everything on the left side is going to arc out and to the left. So we're going to come out, and it kind of rounds underneath. So here's the first segment of the gourd. Rounding, this will be the biggest section too. Rounding in towards the center. And we're going to have two other nubbly bubbly bits on this pumpkin. We're going to have two other nubbly bubbly bits. These ones will get progressively smaller. And actually first do something for me. Come up to the top up here and do a more drastic kind of arc, almost like a V shape. Let's come on each side and do almost like a V shape on each side of the stem, like this. Okay. Then the next segment, start here, come out. This one's going to be just a little bit less large than this one. Out and then down. And at the bottom, you can just round it in. This one's a little less wide. And you can see by having that V, we've already created the top of this section, which will come out. And this one kind of disappears because it's going around the side of the pumpkin. At the back, you can do even a little bubble on each one of these. On the opposite side, on the right-hand side, they're all going to arc out to the right. So the biggest sections are in the middle here. So this one kind of bubble up and out. Okay. And then maybe here I just have one more segment like this. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments total for the pumpkin. Once again, take your time and please pause anytime you need to. I like keeping on at a steady pace, but I have painted this before. All right. Next, let's just do a few little lines to insinuate this kind of wall we have in behind our pumpkin. So let's come back down to this third line right here. It's kind of right at the lip of this little like table. We have some leaves sitting on the table here. So this is right at that third line. And what I want you to do is create a little bit of width. I'm going to come below the third line. I'm just going to create a little width like this. And then another little width on top, kind of coming into this book above. And you can kind of think of this as like the top of a little ledge. Okay. And now we're going to come up to this line here. I want this kind of groove in the wall. It's like an embossed detail in the wall. This kind of winds up right with the, right on top of the pumpkin. So now I'm going to come just on top of the book. I'm going to come in like this. All the way across. Kind of right at the top of the book. And then come in a little bit, centimeter plus, you could call it a pinky's width or a fat pinky's width. Then come down, then follow this line across like this. Just like this. So there we have this detail, and then the next line down below. Do one more line right here, and then that's it. Actually, we could do one more line kind of right at the bottom, almost like where these two books meet. Do another line here because the ground gets really dark under here. And it's a little lighter in behind these bits of foliage. I like to give myself one more little indicator, one more mark with my pencil, and that's kind of where this shrub, this bit of foliage is sitting up here. I like seeing how it sits within these thirds, within these sections. It kind of cuts off this like swoop down below halfway, kind of going to fit in this area like this. We're going to get maybe a little leaf or two in there. It almost creates this really cool negative space around the pumpkin. So we're really looking at this arc of the wall and behind. So we've got the branch kind of We can do this really messy. We'll change it with our paint. You know, it gets kind of really dark over here. So I'm just kind of looking at this. We're going to paint over this. This is just to indicate roughly where we're going to have that branch. And that's it for the sketch. Now we're going to establish what we call the underpainting. So once you have your preliminary drawing, we're going to start blocking in some shadows and midtones right into the first layer of our painting. And they're going to do a lot of heavy lifting for us when it comes trying to like darken the books, darken the pumpkin. So I want you to pour out some colors for me now on your palette. Squeeze out for me some burnt sienna, some burnt umber, and some ultramarine blue. And I want to make a nice dark color right now. So I want you to take 1 scoop of that burnt umber, like a nice thumb-sized dollop like this, because we'll use this color again, and mix it with an equal amount of ultramarine blue. This is going to give us our homemade black color. So the 3 colors we're going to use in our underpainting into the colored ground is our homemade black. Once again, this is equal parts burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And if you see it here, it looks black, doesn't it? The other colors we'll be using, and typically I only show mixed colors on here, but I'll just show you the 3 colors next to each other. This is plain burnt umber, which is a cool brown. And I'll show you the difference. When we're talking about color temperature, like if you hear an artist say cool and warm, let me try to exemplify that with these browns. So this is burnt umber, and this is burnt sienna. We're going to use these 3 colors for the entire underpainting. So a cool brown is one that has more cool colors in it. So this brown, burnt umber, has a lot more blue in it. And brown is always a mix of the 3 primary colors or 2 secondary colors. So brown is always red, yellow, and blue, but the amount of each color changes the brown. So this brown has more blue in it. This brown has more red and yellow in it. So this one's warmer because it's got more red and yellow. This one's cool because it's got more blue. And that homemade black, look how dark we got just by mixing the blue and the burnt umber. It's a lovely color. So we're going to come around all of the elements in our drawing to block them in. So here we go. For doing the books, you're going to want a brush with a nice flat edge. I'm going to start with some of that homemade black color, but what I want to do is add a bit more water into it just to help it flow and kind of move around the canvas a bit better. So I'm going to basically outline all of my books like this. And this bright brush works for doing the straight lines, but when it comes to the curves, I'll probably switch to a round brush like this. When you get to that first really angled book, with that homemade black, you can even fill in the spine, that's this side here, because it's so dark. You can take a couple coats to fill in a really nice opaque dark color. Opaque is just the opposite of translucent, so it means really not see-through at all, really solid. So acrylics are always a little translucent, which is great for techniques like glazing, but we want to start building up those darks and midtones. That bit of water just helps the paint flow. Now, when it comes to some of the other areas of the painting, I like to switch to more like let's go more into the burnt umber for doing the details in the wall. Let's get into those grooves and get them nice and dark like this. Now under this last section here, which is right here, I'm going to go into a bit of the homemade black and darken under here just a little bit extra. This. And when I'm finished the detailing on the wall, I'm going to come into that homemade black and I'm really going to fill in. Remember, we drew this little line like right here around the bottom of this book, and I just switched to a bigger brush like my mini fan because there's no tiny details here. So I grab a brush like this, and you can use burnt umber too, but the homemade black's going to be more opaque. Here we go. And even with the homemade black a little bit up the side, but really what I want to do here is switch to more like the burnt sienna color. That's that warmer brown. So I want to get to the top of the book stack. I am now going to block in for myself so I don't lose it. Actually, I'm going to take a bit of burnt sienna right here too. It's kind of right under this ledge here. Okay, and now when I get up into the area where these leaves are going to be, I'm going to switch to this. It's an acrylic fan. It's just a soft fan brush. And I'm going to drip a whole bunch of water into some burnt sienna until it's a consistency we call a wash, till it's really runny and see-through. So this is the same color burnt sienna, but with a whole bunch of water in it. This is called a wash. And it will create a lighter color just by adding water in here. And I'm going to use this wash to, I may even just add more water lightly. This whole area is going to be filled with a leaf-like texture. So the shapes we'll be seeing are like this. Just kind of filling in that area we drew in. And the littlest leaf might be right here. And this is just a placeholder for now and maybe a place to warm up with our mark making. Okay, oops. So like this. Just these really kind of leafy textures coming over our pumpkin with that wash-like consistency. And the final thing we're going to block in with some of these midtones are some of the books and the pumpkin. The books are more shadowed on the bottom half of each of the books. So let's grab a brush like this. This is a 1/4 inch flat. I'm going to go into some burnt umber, maybe a little water, just to help it flow. And on the bottom half of each of the books on the spine, I'm going to add a little burnt umber kind of straight across. Make sure not on the weight parts of the book. So just kind of on the spine. I'm going to come in with some burnt umber. So this book, and then I'm on the second one. And just coming in and adding a little shadow in there, like this, on the bottom side of the book. On the third book, I can do the same. This one here, only when we get to the fourth book are we going to change that up a little bit. Okay, all the books, again, have a little bit more of a shadow on the bottom. It takes a few layers to build this up, so doing this right here in the underpainting helps us create the light source. Now this book here is turned, so that's the one that already has the really dark spine. So we can actually just come in and redarken the spine on this side like this. And that's all we have to do for this one, where the pages are this way. And then we're back to the bottom two books, and we can come back into the burnt umber and just add a little water. It will just help the brush kind of glide across. It's all good for that paint to be a bit see-through in this layer, like this. I'm going to do the same thing with that green book. Just a little burnt umber right across, kind of cutting it into light and dark here. Now, the other detail that we have in our books are these kind of ridges, these arced ridges along the binding of the book. So to do those, I want you to grab a round brush and go into a little bit of your homemade black, this color, and we're gonna block some of those arcs in. This reminds me of like encyclopedias. I used to love old encyclopedias. Like all the world's knowledge in the books. Okay. So I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines kind of dividing this in equal parts. So in the spine, equal-ish. You can always tweak it later on, but I might do one here. And then I'm going to go for equal-ish parts down. And if we run out of room, you can always have one that's a little bit bigger, like where we put the color in. For now, just take a little round brush. So what I might do at the end is kind of try to do one that's maybe an equal, like similar to these ones, and then leave this big one there. Actually, it looks like this one worked out pretty well where they're all about the same. All right. And let's do the same thing. Let's block the lower one into some segments. Maybe give this one some bigger segments. You have lots of opportunities to tweak these segments, so just do your best. And on to the third book, let's do the same. I have about 6 lines in mine, but there's no rules to these books, okay? You can have more of these or less. Just arc across the spine part. This book is all pages here, so nothing there. And the same thing on the ones then when we get to these lower ones under this one that's really turned. Now there's our spine up on an angle, so let's do some marks in here. Sometimes if I have equal shapes, then a big one at the end, I'll do kind of just like a double line at the end, creating some kind of symmetry-ish. And the same thing on the book below that green one. Now the last thing we're going to do is the pumpkin. I'm going to use a small little brush here. My 0 round or 1 rounds. I'm going to go into the burnt umber and I'm going to outline my stem. Actually, I'm going to fill in the stem with a nice dark coat. And then let's come around the ridges of the pumpkin with the burnt umber. You can add a little water to your paint if you want it to flow a little bit more smooth, coming around the curves. Could take a little burnt umber under the pumpkin too, kind of in the top of the book, so it's nice and shadowy. A little something like this. And the last thing I like to do in the pumpkin, we're going to go back to this wash-like consistency. Get a nice small brush, like a 12 flat. Go back into some of that watery paint for me. And our pumpkin is lit. So you can see the shadows. Like if I cut it like this with a brush, do you see how down here is a dark orange and up here is the light orange? That indicates where our light source is coming from. It's coming from above and a little bit more on kind of the front right side, kind of like shining down like this on the pumpkin. So it's going to create some shadows on the underside. So if we take some of that burnt sienna, we're going to get a shadow under here and then a little bit up the opposite side. Okay, and same thing here, a little shadow down below, a little bit up the opposite side, little shadow here. So block in the shadow. And we're going to do one more thing to help us with the layering, the shadows and the midtones in this painting. We're going to dry this, and then we're going to coat the whole thing in what is called a colored ground. So we're going to do a colored ground all over everything. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to grab my little travel size blow dryer. I'm going to spritz these colors so they stay nice and wet. And then I'm going to give this a blast. Make sure everything is nice and dry, especially any thick parts you have. And I want you to get a nice big brush like this 12 flat. Or if you have a big gesso brush like this, you can use this too. Just it has to be big and it has to be soft. And we're gonna make that wash. Take a little small size, kind of toothpaste sized dollop of the burnt sienna and just drip water in until you have a big watery pool of this color. So if I take my brush and I go like this, we're gonna get this kind of transparent mid-tone all over. And don't worry, even if you get this too dark, you could say just go into water and just use water right on here. Just use a nice big brush and watery paint. And we're going to come over everything with this beautiful mid-tone. So all the white should have a nice bit of color on it. Helps so much with our layering. Okay, and this technique again is called a colored ground. Once it's on, we have our whole canvas toned and we are going to dry it once again. If you have any brushes sitting in the water, give them a good rinse. Now we're going to mix all the colors that we need for our entire painting. So make sure you have some of your homemade black, your burnt umber, and if you need more burnt sienna, squeeze that out. I'm also going to squeeze out a little bit of ultramarine blue. Excuse me, a tiny little bit of phthalo blue. Put some green next to some red. Let's also squeeze out some orange and some yellow. Ooh. Now this red, this orange, and this yellow are very saturated. And what we have in this painting are earthy colors. You might have heard the technical term for that, muted colors, or my least favorite term, muddy colors. And yes, mud is brown, but these are just neutral colors. They're the colors of nature most often. They're definitely the colors of autumn as things turn more golden, more brown. So we're going to do some fun color mixing here. We're going to take our blues and our reds and our oranges, and we're going to neutralize them largely by mixing complementary colors together. So this is tons of fun. We're going to start by mixing some red and some green. This is going to make a earthy kind of brown. So don't use all your red, but take 1 scoop of it, like this size. Okay. 1 scoop of red and an equal amount of green, and mix it together, and look at the brown that you get. It should be a nice reddish kind of brown. And what I like about this is just equal parts red and green. Really pretty brown, similar to burnt umber, but like a little more reddish. So this is red and green. Now, if I were to just add a tiny bit more red to that, so red with just a little bit of green, gets you a burgundy red like this. And if we add just a little bit of red to some green, so instead of equal amounts more green than red, we get an earthy green. So these 3 colors, all from just mixing red and green. So we've got this neutral red, we've got this neutral green. Now I want you to take some of your homemade black, which was just burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Now the complementary color to blue is orange. And brown has a lot of orange in it. So the reason that we get this kind of graying or neutralizing effect, think of neutrals as like brown or gray colors. It's because it has a complementary color in it. So by adding the brown to the blue, we're essentially adding orange to blue. Let's take some of that homemade black, and I want you to add kind of equal scoops of the homemade black and white. And we should get this really cool kind of gray color. I'm gonna just go below the homemade black here. So I'm gonna get this kind of cool gray color. Add more white to this, and we have this really cool blue gray. And if I want it to be a bit more blue, I'll just add a bit more ultramarine blue. And the blue looks so pretty, kind of like a blue gray against the orange. So I love using like a light blue gray like this. This is just variations of ultramarine blue and brown with a little white in it. And I like to mix another blue-gray color. So the color here we have in behind is similar, but we're going to use phthalo blue this time. So let's take equal scoops of burnt umber and phthalo blue, just like we did with the ultramarine blue here. And in its darkest form, this is a very dark color. I'll put it right here. So another kind of homemade black would be burnt umber and phthalo blue. But when we add a little bit of white to this, we get what I like to call a dusty teal or a muted teal. And these two muted blues, earthy blues we'll call them, are so lovely in the background and in the books. So again, this is just burnt umber and phthalo blue. And I want you to try adding just a little bit of white to get kind of a smoky teal like this. And then add more white to the color. So I'm just kind of making a gradient where I get a little bit whiter until we have a color that's like a lot lighter like this. So these kind of blue gray colors we're going to use in our background and in our books. Now to neutralize the yellow and orange, which we're going to do next, we can use complementary colors, but today I'm going to use brown in them instead. So if we take a scoop of our orange, add a scoop of your burnt sienna. The cadmium orange is really vibrant. So by adding burnt sienna, we still have a really lovely bright orange, but it's a little bit more neutral than that color right out of the tube. We will get a little bit of the brightest orange in the pumpkin, but this orange plus the burnt sienna, and I'll show them side by side so you can see the saturated orange and the muted orange. So plain cadmium orange is really almost like a bright neon orange. Here it is. Booyah. That saturation is going to call a lot of attention to the pumpkin, which really is the focal point of this painting. So we're saving our saturated colors to draw the eye into the pumpkin. So for all the shadows in the pumpkin and all the other oranges in the leaves, we're going to use more like this color, the cadmium orange plus burnt sienna. And for the yellow, we're going to add brown to that too instead of purple. And we are going to use burnt umber, so the cool brown this time. So this time take a scoop of burnt umber and add it to a scoop of yellow and watch what happens. This creates a color called yellow ochre. I'm just going to show you these colors. So here's the plain yellow, really saturated again. When if I add just a little bit of brown, you get a yellow ochre color like this. If I add a bit more brown, again, a really pretty golden, earthy yellow. So now we have a beautiful fall palette that we can use throughout this entire painting. And we're going to start painting the background first with those dusty blues and some of the yellow ochre we just mixed. But we need to add a bit of white. So we've added white to the blue. Now we need to add a bit of white to this kind of yellow ochre mix. I'm going to put a little white beside my yellow ochre color here. And let's add some of that homemade yellow ochre to some white. So you can see this color here when we add the white. So with a little bit of white, and then with a lot of white, and you can see how these dusty yellow and blues are going to look really pretty in our background here. And just a reminder to keep that beautiful earthy palette once you've mixed it all together, nice and moist. You can just take your spray bottle every, 15 minutes or so, just very lightly mist the tops of those paints. Okay, let's start filling everything in. Into the background. I'm going to take some of my lightest, that ultramarine blue, that kind of grayish blue, and I'm going to come around the pumpkin. You could also use some of that really light teal blue too. That looks pretty in here. Notice I'm not painting in that really dark spot where we have the leaves just yet. Get a nice juicy amount of paint, and I'm using my bright brush for now. Getting a little blue in here. You can mix it up between the smoky blue or the teal blue. Just use whichever one you like best. And I also want to, before I get too far, I'm gonna switch to a bigger brush for a second. I want to take some of this kind of yellow ochre color, and I want to pull some of it on here too. Again, kind of up towards the area where we'll have those plants, but not totally covering it. The nice thing about having the colored ground in the background is if we don't color in a spot, we have this beautiful earthy color showing through. And take a bit of that light grayish blue, maybe a little right here. I'm going to take some of that light blue into the sides. You could use the teal blue here too, okay? This teal blue will also feature into the first kind of 3 segments in the wall. 1, 2, 3. And I want to soften these together a little bit. You can use big brush strokes. I might lighten here a little. Mixing that yellow color right in with these blues, it's all good. You can even take a little bit, let's actually go into some of the really, really light yellow ochre color and kind of highlight the tops of these sections here. Let them mingle and mix. Now, when it comes time to pulling in the plant foliage, especially up here, let's start remember these reddish green colors we mixed? Let's take some that was kind of equal parts red and green. We can add some in here. And let's take a little bit of white into that kind of reddish green. Just so it's a little bit lighter. And I want to start creating some little leafy shapes. I'm softening this a little bit into the background, but I'm keeping the edges so they're kind of leaf shaped. You could use some of your blue gray in here too. It should be darker than the wall color, almost like a little shadow. Let your neutrals mix in here. Don't be afraid to use some of your kind of lighter blue gray to create a bit of a dappled texture. So if I take a brush like this here, this is my 12 flat, and I have some of my reddish green, you know, in here. I can take some of my blue gray in here too. And look at the shape. So a little something like this, As long as it's a little bit darker. I'm trying to taper a few of these leaves off so maybe they get kind of smaller at the tip. You can go back into some of that reddish green. I have like a whole field of kind of neutrals. A whole mix of colors. So just a little darker than the wall color. Maybe back into that burnt sienna. Can add a few leaves in the burnt sienna color. And I like taking that burnt sienna, just kind of carrying the color down where it's going to get really dark beside the books. So I just want you to build in the shadow. And again, you can mix all those neutrals in there. We'll layer some orange over top later on. But for now, just build in this wall color. Don't be afraid to move in between the neutrals. And then once we have the shadow on, I like taking this brush here. This is the bristle fan. And I'm just going to load the edge of this brush right here, dipping it into the burnt sienna and creating the grooves in the wall. So we already have some nice darks in there. Let's just accentuate that. Now, if any of this kind of disappeared as we were blending, can pull those lines back in. And if you have, you can use your mini fan or even a brush like this bristle fan. And let's have fun with a little bit of dry brushing here. So if I were to take a light brown, like when we added the white to the reddish brown, it's like this color when we added white to this color gets a little lighter. So the red with the green, when we add white, kind of turns into this really cool reddish brown. Could take a bit of this color, say with the bristle fan, no water in the brush, try just dragging a little over the color and you get this really cool like wood effect, which I just love. You can practice on this side if you're a little nervous before going on the front. Just kind of drag it down and try to get this sort of rustic texture. I like the way that looks in here. And then finally, I like to make sure we've got a little bit of a highlight. I like using this light yellow ochre just at the tips of these sections. Just showing that they're kind of raised parts of the wall. And I like having big expressive marks in the wall. Like it's not all perfectly blended. It gives a little bit more energy to the painting and it creates kind of a dappled look. So up here in this light kind of gray color that we made with our ultramarine blue and brown, I go for a light version of that color. You know, if the shadow gets too big, you can just add these little dappled marks into the wall. And see how I just kind of pushed the color into the shadow, and I was really expressive with this one here too. So lots of unfinished marks, just kind of nice energy in the brush strokes up here. Whoa. Oof. Now, the nice thing about acrylic is even if you do something like I just did here, which is dropped my whole finished painting into the paint, as long as it's dry, you can kind of take a clean napkin. Like this paint is really kind of indestructible once it's dry, and you can just wipe it off like this. Now to finish off our background, we're going to paint in this little shelf here and make sure under the books are nice and dry, and then we're going to get into painting the pumpkin and the books. This under painting we did, the colored ground, is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us in terms of building in those darks. To get this kind of warm yellowy book without the underpainting, take at least 4 layers, where it's just going to take 2 and maybe some highlights here. So we cut down a lot of layering, especially with those warm colors with the colored ground. So sometimes people ask why I do the colored ground. And again, it just helps with the opacity of the paint. And it can add that warm glow. And then, you know, if you've got little bits showing through, like up here, I've got a little area where I didn't paint, and it just plays in with the warm color. So when I'm choosing a colored ground, I'll just use a color that's kind of elsewhere in the painting or representative of like the light source. So now I want you to go into a little bit of your burnt sienna, and we're going to paint in this ledge. So there's kind of two parts. There's the top of the ledge here, and then the lip of the ledge here. We're going to fill the whole thing in with burnt sienna. So now the whole background should have, you know, a layer of paint on it. Not the books or the pumpkin, but all the background, everything else. So add that burnt sienna, then take a little bit of white on the tip of a brush, and I don't care whether you use a flat brush or a fan brush like this. Just get a little white for me. And we've got the lip of the table, so I want you to the shelf. Put a little highlight in the lip of the shelf like this. I don't want to add any more white in there, so I'm going to tap the brush off. I'm just going to try to feather over the edge of that and just pull it down a little bit. And then maybe add a bit more white at the top. With the highlight at the top and also that really dark shadow below, we should get the illusion of a lip on the table. I take a little bit of a lighter brown, like that reddish brown with white, or even burnt sienna with some white, and just drag it across the upper part. Use a fan brush to try to get some little bristly texture. And want everything to be kind of multi-tonal. Okay. This. I'll hold it like this. It's shiny. The sienna is a very shiny color, so I'm just ankling it so you can see. Okay, wonderful. We're going to put one coat into the pumpkin before we start layering into our books. So we have our nice kind of rusty orange color here for our shadow color. And now I want you to take a little bit of white next to that rusty orange color, which we made with cadmium orange and burnt sienna. And let's try equal parts of this rusty orange and white. Now, when we mix this color, it creates orange, but it's kind of like a pinkish orange. It looks beautiful as a shadow, but once we start adding the white to it, again, it kind of goes pinkish. So the way we get around that is when you add white to the color, the burnt sienna plus orange, we have to add yellow. And that yellow is going to warm it back up and create a really lovely highlight color for the pumpkin. So again, cadmium orange plus burnt sienna. Then when you add white to it, just make sure you scoop over a nice bit of yellow. So if we take that plain burnt sienna and orange into the bottom half of the pumpkin, right where the shadow is, and take it up the left-hand side of each of the sections too. So this section here have a little bit more shadow on the left-hand side. So kind of carving out the highlight bits. Same thing over here. This section here is the closest to the light source. So it's mostly just going to have a little shadow in the crease, a little bit like this. So we're going to start with that dark color. Then I want you to move in to a lighter version of this color that has more yellow in it. And I want you to go for a nice yellowy orange like this. And this is just orange plus the yellow and a bit of burnt sienna. A nice light orange. Okay. And let's put this in the highlight section. Of the pumpkin. The little top bits in the back too, you can have a nice kind of medium orange, just those little bubbles there. So once we have the light color on, we want to soften it together a little bit. And you can just use a little 1/4 inch flat, or even like I'm using my 1/4 inch whisk brush, just like a flat brush. I want to soften the shadows and the highlights together. So I'm going to just take my brush and hover over just a little bit where those two colors meet like this. You may just need to lightly tap, okay? The orange is so see-through, even if you go right over those dark lines. If you got them nice and dark like I did, you should still be able to see them through. I want to do one more thing while the pumpkin is still wet. Come into your lightest orange. Your orange, yellowy orange with some white in it. And again, never stress if your colors are a little different than mine. Every time I paint my pumpkin, my oranges are a little bit different. It's all good. We just want to have some darker oranges, a medium orange. This will be our light orange. It's almost white. Okay, it's just got a little, like a light peachy orange color. Grab just a little bit of your paint, and I'm going to start with this section here. A highlight. The highlight's going to be a little bit more to the right. So I'm going to do a little highlight, just a little bit more to the right and a little bit kind of more down the right hand side of the section. And same thing on this one here too. So a little bit more down the right hand side. This one at the top, like this. Okay. Wipe excess paint off your brush, and just like we did the first time, we're going to just feather over the edges to hover these into the wet color. So I'm not brushing all over. I'm just going to sit right at the edge of the highlight. And when I try to feather this in, I try to pull it a little bit in the direction of the pumpkin flesh. So kind of like down. I try to just go around the edge so I preserve some of the darker parts of the pumpkin. Here too, just a little hover. Now, if you have to, you could come back into some of those darker oranges down below. Like if you pulled too much highlight in. Okay, we should get a nice little nubbly bubbly shape. And we can keep building up towards white here. We can keep building up towards white here. So I think I'm going to do one more little highlight. I'm going to try to grab some pure white. Actually, my paints are looking a little thirsty, so before I do anything, I'm going to mist my palette. There we go. I'm going to go into the tiniest bit of white. This time I'm just going to put a little here. I'm going to tap it out. A little here. A little here. If I feel like it's getting too crazy, I'll just go into a little bit of a darker orange to help. Soften it in a little. Make sure that your stem is nice in the dark color, the dark brown, and we'll add some highlights to the stem. Your stem can even come into a few of the little divots in the pumpkin a little bit. This. Lots of juicy details here. Feel free to slow down and pause whenever you need to. With our pumpkin on, we'll want to come in and do a few more little details in there. For now, let's go ahead and start filling in these books. So the book have on top, these two are really kind of leathery color, a reddish brown leather. So I'm going to take a scoop of burnt umber, and I'm going to take a scoop of cadmium red medium, and I'm going to mix them together for a really dark brownish red. So this is just burnt umber and red. It's just this color plus red. It's kind of similar to the green mixed with the red. It's just a little different. You could use either. So this is the color we made with green and red. Very similar, isn't it? We just want a nice brownish red. So I'm going with burnt umber mixed with some red for a nice dark color. And I'm going to come along the bottom of the book with this. And bring it up to fill the whole spine. Just use a nice small brush that fits in the area, like a 12 flat or your angled shader. You can come along the edges of the book, sandwiching the pages. If we take a little bit of this color and mix it with just a little bit of white, should get a slightly lighter version of this color. don't add too much white. If you take a peek at my book here, the top of the book here, you'll see it's just a little bit lighter than the spine. So just a little bit of white into this reddish brown. It's just a little bit lighter. Oops. And let's do the same thing with the book down below. Let's take some of this reddish brown into the spine of the book. And into the covers of the book that are kind of surrounding the pages. This. The book below, do a slightly different color. Let's come into the burnt sienna. Into our third book. You can even see the shading that we did right through where it's darker on the bottom. This book, I like to come back into a bit of the reddish brown. And a bit of that lighter reddish brown. Remember, this one's on an angle, so this is like the corner of the book here. Bit of a lighter color on the top of the book. That little corner that's peeking through here. The book down below, I want to use one of my smoky blues. So I'm going to come into the phthalo blue with the brown and give this a nice juicy coat, nice and dark on the bottom of the book. And a slightly lighter version of the color for the cover that is peeking through on top here. So the top in the corner like this. What we're doing here is just blocking in the basic shapes. Basic blocks of color. down below it's a dark green. So I like to take that green that we mixed with red. So let's green's just a little bit of red, not a saturated green. So if you remember, here's a plain saturated green. It's really vibrant. It's too vibrant for this earthy palette. When we mix this green with a little red, we get that nice dark earthy green. So that's the color we're going to go for, is the green mixed with the red, and just fill in the kind of large section of the book. I've got a little bit of kind of the corner of this book showing through. So if I take some of that green, earthy green, and I mix it with some white, I get a bit of a lighter earthy green. So just making tints, the green with the red, if I mix it with white, I get this really nice earthy kind of green. It's a nice muted palette. That green with the white. Okay. And there's that little bit of the top of this book kind of peeking through here. So now we have all the darks of the books filled in. We're going to do the same thing with the inside of the pages of the books, and we're going to use that nice yellow ochre color. So the burnt umber mixed with the yellow. And we want to have one of the lighter versions of this color with some white. So yellowy brown. When I fill this in, I'm using my angled shader, but I could use a 1/4 inch flat here too. And we're just going to come into the pages part, and as much as I can, obviously around that kind of right where they meet the book, I've got to be a bit more careful carving out the form. I'm going to try as much as I can to pull my brush in the direction of the pages. Just because you can see the mark of the brushes, you can tell what direction, brush directionality that the brush was pulled in, and it can help insinuate form. Or you can kind of, another way around that to get some of that brush work. And let me show you up close here. You know, if I was to come in here, another way around that would be to kind of fill it in however you need to first, like this, pulling here, there, and everywhere. And then before the paint dries, just to kind of drag your brush through. And you can see the visible marks. And if I didn't have that orange there, that would be scraping down to raw canvas. So another reason to have that colored ground is sometimes it peeks through. Okay, so we can fill in the shape first with the paint and then drag as much as we can through. Now when I get to this book here, this is the first book that has a bit of a shadow on it. Shadow from the book above on these pages. So I'm going to get a nice bit of the page color in there. Then I'm going to go into one of my kind of medium bluey gray colors. It's just blue plus brown. And we're going to see a little shadow like right here. It's kind of triangular shaped shadow. And once again, you can kind of paint the shadow in, but before you leave, kind of pull it a little bit like this in the direction that the pages are going. Into that yellow ochre. Okay. Now this blue book has that same shadow on it. Get a little bit of that grayish blue, or you could use a light brown. And the book above here is casting a shadow on the book down here. So this one too has got a bit of a kind of triangular shaped shadow. I'm just painting the lower cover on this book, which it looks like I forgot to paint in. There we go. We're going to do some details into our book, but I want to let this layer dry. So let's grab our blow dryers. Mist those paints if they're looking a little thirsty. Just a light, gentle mist on top. We don't want them swimming together or merging into a single pool. So just a light mist on top. And then we're going to dry the book layer. We're going to add some of the details, the colors, the highlights, and then this kind of gilded, sometimes this is even like gold, onto the spine of the books. Now we have some different colors into our books and we want to get some highlights into them as well. So the top of the book is a little bit lighter than the bottom. So here we used our reddish brown. So into these sections, we could even kind of come in with a bit of a lighter reddish brown right across the top. Just give it a little highlight. That's just the original color we used, a little bit lighter. And then kind of in each section, and I'm using my angled shader here, I'm going to lighten. I don't want it too light. I want it just a little bit lighter. I'm going to have these two sections blue. So I'm just going to lighten the top of a few of these segments like this, letting the darker color be below. Same thing with the blue. I like to use the phthalo blue with the burnt umber. It's a really dark blue, and I'm going to put it at the bottom of this section here. And then I'm going to use a lighter version of that blue, but again, not too much lighter. I just want to go a tiny bit lighter. That's probably too much lighter. Just a little bit lighter. At the top in there. I'm going to do one of these down below here too. In this book, I might do here the darker blue in this shape at the bottom and a little bit lighter at the top. It just helps show the kind of curve of the spine of the book. And then for the second book, I want to come into a bit of that lighter brown color. Oops. So if you go too light, it'll look a bit funny. But then in all the segments, just kind of a little bit of that light brown. And if it helps kind of keep the edge clean, you can sketch across the top of the book just so you know where you're at. A little something like this. And then for the book down below, we use the burnt sienna. So I like taking burnt sienna with a little bit of white first and kind of, this is the top of the book here that's kind of peeking through. Don't cover up the book cover of the book above it. So just, you don't even have to cover everything. I'm using my angled shader, you can let parts of the background show through. Okay, I'm just kind of coming over the book like this. And same thing, burnt sienna with a little white. Okay. Oops, see, that's too light. I want it to be just a little lighter. And then, and maybe these two sections, I'm going to add red. So now I'm going to come into some pure red and want some red sections in this book. I might even go into one of my dark yellow ochres that does not have any white in it. So that's just like the pure yellow and brown without any white in it. And accentuate some of those highlights. The top. For the book below, I just used that light, kind of the highlight color we used in these ones, that reddish brown for the top of the book here, and the little bit that's kind of peeking through. And then for the spine of this book, I want to keep it super dark, like homemade black. It's really in shadow, so I'm just going to make it really dark. For this one here. And the blue book, instead of red or blue, I just did different variations of this blue. So maybe use kind of like a dark, instead of the phthalo blue, we could use one of the dark smoky blues in one of these sections. Make it darker on the bottom and lighter on the top. And then maybe some of the greeny blue. Darker on the bottom. Lighter on the top. This book is pretty dark. I didn't go too crazy with the highlighting. Any colors work here as long as they're darker on the bottom and lighter on the top. So you could do one of your, gray. I did gray blue in these back two squares and this one. And then I did the greeny blue here and here. And if you need to blend, just lightly tap between the light and the dark. So just darker on the bottom, lighter on top. For the bottom book, I went back into some of the dark green and just enhanced some of the sections with the green. And for the alternating color in this book, I actually did some burnt sienna. It looks so pretty with the green. So burnt sienna without any white in it. And I just did a couple of segments like this. I'm not going to do too much highlighting in this book. Again, it is largely just kind of covered up. Oops. With other colors. So now that we have the lights and darks and some alternate colors into the spine of the book, we're going to go ahead and start highlighting. And we are going to highlight with that kind of yellow ochre color, the yellow with the white, yellow with brown and white. I want you to use a flat brush where you can get a nice straight edge, and you can even trace a ruler if you need to. We've done most of the painting freehand, so feel free to try if you freehand as well. So that nice kind of yellowy brown. To get a nice straight line, use a flat brush, a 1/4 inch flat, and pinch the tip of the brush down. We're going to come across the very top of the spine of the book. And to do the curves, you might want to switch to a round brush like this, because it's got a flexible tip. Again, adding a little water in your paint to help it flow, just a little. And then let's come down. I can still see my dark marks through. So I'm going to come at the top of these marks. While I'm here, I might even take a little bit of white through a few of the pages. Or if not pure white, we want to keep it, the white's a little too stark, and just use a little bit of a lighter parchment color. The top book is kind of catching the most light, so I like to come through with a little bit, whatever kind of golden color you used, come through with one that's a little bit lighter and highlight kind of the same spot that you highlighted on the book, a little bit extra, just at the very top, like this. And it's amazing how that one line kind of really shapes up the whole book. I don't know why I'm painting. The top of the book gets almost completely covered in leaves. Now, as the books go down, the details get a little bit darker. So instead of, I'm not going to do the bright highlights like I did in the top book for this one, but it is still going to be decently bright. So we can come down try to go right, if you can see your dark marks through a little bit, try to go at the top of each one of those. Really capturing the curve of the spine. We can add a bit of a lighter parchment color into the pages. So when I do this, I let some of the dark color shine through as well. For the next book, I'm going to use a bit of a darker golden color. And let's take our flat brush and let's definitely come along. Here's the top of the book here. Remember the book angle, so we're seeing a little bit of the front of the book, the jacket of the book. And a little bit of that lighter page color come through, leave some of the darker color in there. Okay. This is really shaping up our books. Now for this one here, I'm just going to come into that lighter page color and add some streaks. You can add some little, oops. You can add some little bits of pure white if you like. When you're doing the highlights over the shadow side, instead, you're just going to use a little bit of a lighter version of the color you have. Like use a bit of a lighter gray color. Could do a lighter version of whatever color is the top of your book. Mine's kind of the reddish brown. So take whatever color the book cover is. I went with a reddish brown. We can highlight the top of the spine here a little bit. Into the blue book, I'm just going to use a lighter version of the blue, and this book is going underneath the one above it. So I'm just going to highlight the top of the spine, just like we did here. And I'm going to use this color down the sides. Like this. And for the book down below, the greenish red, mix it with some white, should get kind of a muted gray green. And again, here you can come along the top of the book and then down the segments. Like this. And then also in our last two books, come back into a little bit of your lighter page color. Leave some streaks, don't cover all of that beautiful darkness. Now to finish off the books, I like to do a little bit of writing, like adding some title into the back of the book. I'm going to snuggle in for this, and I just did some little scribbles in the light golden color. So I'm going to take some of this yellow ochre that has some white in it. I like this. I like this. Add water and use a 0 round or one that has a nice tip. And you have to add the water so that this color will flow. I don't want it too light. I'm going to use this color here. And on all of these books here, I might add a little writing. Like this. Same thing in this one, same color. Into the blue book, let's just use a blue that's a little bit lighter of whatever color is on there. So kind of one of these medium teal blues or the gray blue, whichever one you prefer. And We can do it in the green too. It might get covered up by a leaf, but I find little bits still show through. So having some of these details kind of in all the books is really nice. So here's my pile of books finished. A few finishing touches that you don't have to have, but you might need is coming in with some of the homemade black, for instance, or a really dark brown. If you found that your books are maybe lacking a shadow below, sometimes I find just coming in with a dark color, using a brush with a really thin line, okay? And just kind of a little separation between them can help. Like if as you were coloring them through with the paint, we lost a little shadow. Just a little something like this. And it's the difference between that lighter parchment color and the darker one that really helps get the pagination in the books, the look of pages. All right, we've got our books, we've got our background. Our pumpkin can use a few more tweaky deakies, and then we're gonna get into the autumn leaves. I'm going to come into my medium orange and kind of along the shadow side here. And just on the inside, I'm going to come down with this highlight. This side is kind of closest to the highlight. And I want to come down that area where the shadow is. And here too, just going to kind of build up these midtones. With this yellowy orange. And here too, the light's coming from this direction. So where the pumpkin is kind of turning this individual nubbly form, the highlight's strongest here and at the top. So I'm just coming with this light kind of yellowy orange. And maybe a little bit more here. This part is the furthest from the light source, which is over here. Maybe a little bit just at the top where it's just kind of hitting the top of this form. So getting a bit more of those yellowy colors in there. And I'm doing that so I can blend the highlight in again. So I'm going to come with my highlight. I got green from my napkin. Always look at that napkin. It can be a source of unwanted color. Nice strong highlight here. And really hitting here, kind of just on the inside edge and the top a little bit. My final highlight's on. I'm going to go back into a little bit of that medium orange yellow color and just kind of go around it, feather it in a little bit. So these three segments of the pumpkin capturing the most light. So it's like each nubbly bubbly segment is picking up the light. A little darker on the far side, the darkest color underneath the segments here. And because this side is turned to the light, kind of getting that extra highlight along the groove. For this one here, light's hitting directly here. And then it turns towards the really dark pumpkin shadow down below. And of course, a bit in this groove, like in between those segments. Let's look one more time at this segment here. Light is hitting the strongest on this one at the top and kind of catching this little groove here. And then making sure that as the form turns under, it's getting dark here and staying some of those darkest oranges in the groove. All right, that pumpkin is just popping. It's the focal point. So I want you to spend a little time there. And then when you're ready, grab your little round brush again, your little detail brush, your 0 round. And if you have some of that kind of muddy green color, the green that has a bit of red in it, let's add some white. This should be kind of a really light, should look like a really light sage green. So this is that greenish red color with lots of white. It's one of the first colors we made with green and red. We've added a little white to it. If I add a little bit more white, you see how it's kind of grayed out the green to this really pretty light sage color? Again, that's just green with a bit of red. And this is that same color, just with different amounts of white. Here we want to go for a pretty light color. And we're going to use a brush that has just a little bit of paint on the tip, light hitting the top and down the side. And we can make sure you have just a bit of paint on the tip of the brush. Come in a little bit and add another little line kind of down. Like this. So really highlighting the one side. And then another little line or two down the shape will give it that look of, you know, pumpkin skin, pumpkin top texture. Like this. If you want, you can even use a bit of your lightest kind of yellow ochre as one really bright highlight down the light source side, down the right. And with that, we are finished our pumpkins and our book. I want you to make sure your background is nice and dry. We're going to get into our leaves. I want to add, bring some of the orange from the pumpkin up into some leaves in this area here. These leaves are kind of a basic leafy shape, and we're going to do it really abstractly with our fan brush. So the leaves are going to get smaller down towards the tip. And I just use a little fan brush and make some little marks like this here. Up here, a little bit bigger. And I honestly just push the brush out, trying to get some little points and jagged marks, or that traditional kind of leaf shape where it comes to a point at the tip. Smaller at the tip, and then some bigger shapes as we come up into this area here. I want to use the darker orange. This was our cadmium orange mixed with burnt sienna. So if you need to make more, just grab some of that cadmium orange and burnt sienna. It's this dark color here. We can always lighten it up. For now, we'll start with this darker orange, and I like to have one little leaf kind of poking down towards the stem. So I'll show you how to do this leaf. Get some paint on the brush, and I'm just going to do out and then back in. So this kind of leafy shape like this. Okay. And then maybe on top, a few more shapes in this orange color. As I come down the tip here now, I'm going to get a little smaller, and then eventually just the tiny little shapes like this. We can take one of our oranges, a little lighter. I like that orange that has the bit of yellow in it. Remember, so it's not so pink when we add a bit of white. We can add a little highlight into a few of these leaves. I just kind of follow one side. Or you can come into other colors like the reddish green. Down here, if we want to have some more kind of brown leaves in this space, that's, you can use your reddish green or your burnt sienna. Just want to make sure that these leaves are kind of tapering down, like this whole side of the painting, kind of this neutral colors coming down, fading into dark. It's so dark here, even if I come in with some plain red and layer it over top like this, it's going to dry really dark. I added some red down here, just a mishmash, like a buffet of these darker autumn colors. Think of a dappled pattern. We're just kind of darkening it a little bit, maybe adding some layers. You can go with some burnt sienna with some white, and don't want you to overthink it. You can use any of your neutral colors here as long as they're darker than the backgrounds. So you can have some really dark ones. I could even come in here with some of this kind of sagey green color. So there's no rules. There's no like do exactly this mark. They're all over. So your job will, your painting will be a bit different than mine. So here's mine here. I quite like this one. This one I had to work quite a bit to get it how I liked it. So I even had to come in with some of my light blue. I had leaves all the way over here. I came back in with my blue. I brought some out. So this I didn't use the green. Here's that reddish color with some white. So slightly different colors, but as long as it's the values are right. This is a different color than this, but it still looks right because we have a harmonious kind of color scheme, and it's more about how light or darker the color is in the exact color. So this one's different too. Maybe a slightly different shape to my leaves, a bit more pointy. The dark orange and the light orange, a different shape than this one, isn't it? Slightly different colors. And again, even coming in with some medium blue into here. Or the green. There's no rules. Could come in with some lighter colors, like if I wanted to take some stuff away, just come into that lighter blue that we had in the background and tap a few of those in there. So I want to show you that you can work this area and correct it. And the kind of more colors you have in here, I think the cooler that it looks. Now we're finished our leaves up here. I want to show you how to pull some maple leaves into the bottom half of our painting. So we're going to pause for a minute. This is a longer, more detailed tutorial, so feel free to break it up in chunks if you like. But I wanted to take my time to show you a bit about painting leaves. You know, if you see someone painting painterly, and they'll say things like, just paint this like loose shape. But the reason you see really good loose painters with the ability to paint a loose leaf is because they know how the shape works. They're not just sitting down moving color around. They start with an understanding of how a maple leaf looks so that they can break it down into shapes and then do it quickly or abstractly. So that's what we're going to do here together. And I'm going to show you how to draw a maple leaf kind of while these books are drying. So the shape we're drawing is the maple leaf, and it has one long leaf in the middle. Okay, so this part will say be like, here's the stem, okay, here's the upper leaf. One long leaf in the middle, and then it has two leaves coming out from this point on an angle that are a little bit less tall than the first one. And we'll have two kind of coming straight out or maybe a little bit down from the sides like this. So long, medium, medium, short, short. If we were to kind of close it up, like the shape, it looks a little something like this, but the tops are really pointy. So I like to come in and say, okay, here's the pointy tops, and then angle it down a little bit. Then in this one here, we kind of have like the pointy top and then angle it in. Okay, so pointy top like this. And the last little part of the maple leaf, kind of connect it down like this. So this is like the basic shape of the leaf, but to make it look organic, you know, there's these little veins in the leaf that come off the center like this, and each one of these kind of has a little line coming through the center like this. And then the peaks of the leaf aren't just flat, they kind of come up like this. So that's kind of the basic shape. But the tops are kind of pointy like this. So to loosen up the shape, we create these little points at the top of the leaf. There's a faster way to do this. That's how I would do it if I was doing like a graphic drawing of a maple leaf. If I wanted to, say, be a little bit looser, I would represent this leaf like this, kind of like the big one. Then there's two small ones, medium ones, and then the little ones kind of coming off the side like this, and then here's the stem. I find this shape a lot easier to play with, because then we can come in and be like, okay, then we have those points on the leaf. I find I get a more organic shape when I start with a shape like this And then, you've got the veins coming through each of these segments of the leaf. And on these, there's little extra veins kind of coming out like this. So here we have a pretty decent kind of maple leaf shapes that we can break down using those like little ovals. The problem is, how often do you see, if we're looking at a landscape like this, a perfect maple leaf from the front? Typically, we don't. You have to take a leaf and like press it almost to get the leaf like a perfect shape like this. So most often, you might just be seeing say, these three sides of the leaf, and this side is curled over. So to create this leaf more abstractly or curled up like we would see it in nature, we're just seeing parts of the leaf, we might say, okay, here's the center bit, big, then a medium, then a small, and then this whole side of the leaf is kind of curled over like this. And it's curled like this. Here's the veins coming down half the leaf, and this whole side is going to be curled around. So this leaf might look a bit more like this. And then maybe this part's kind of curled under. So we see more just like an abstract form, or we might just see a few of the shapes like this. And this part's kind of curled up. So there's another kind of part of a leaf that we might see, a little something like this. So it starts to get a little bit more loosey-goosey. And in terms of paint, let's paint ourselves a few of these to see how that might look with a brush. So if I wanted to paint a leaf, more quickly, more abstractly, I'm not going to see it front on necessarily. I might see just some parts of the leaf. I'll do one front on with you, and then let's practice doing a few little bits. I'm just going to take a nice dark color. I'm going to use this little square brush. So do you remember that shape we did? It was kind of like an oval like this. Two small ovals, and then two coming out of the side, and then the little stem. So if I wanted to paint this loose leaf, then we know that we're going to need to add a few of the spikes onto this shape to make it look more like a maple leaf. So there we've got kind of a maple leaf front on. But what if we have that leaf that's more like curled up, like we would see in nature? So maybe we see kind of like the long part and this part and then this part. But this whole side of the leaf is kind of curled in. So maybe the little stem, it's kind of, sitting on the ground or even leaning up against our book. So we always know we have a big, medium, and small. So if we see half a leaf, it might look a little something like this. Then all we need to do is add a few of those little kind of spikes, bringing these little bits to a tip. This part is going to be curled in on itself. And then all we need to do is maybe take a highlight color, like a lighter brown, to show that this part of the leaf is curled in. Like this. So now, just changing the color of that segment, we get it looking like the maple leaf is a little bit more curled up. Sometimes we just see even fewer parts of the leaf. Like maybe a leaf has fallen from a tree and is kind of sitting on the ground like this. So this loose shape is a very maple leaf kind of curled up on the ground kind of look. So is this. Okay. So these kind of shapes are more what we see when we have a leaf like this that is kind of like fallen onto the ground and is resting on the ground and is all curled up on itself. Okay. And that's what we're going to do with the bottom half of our painting. We're going to focus on kind of 4 big leaves on the bottom and a couple of these loose shapes around the top. And we're going to use some of these nice, beautiful browns and yellows. We're going to stick with the same palette for the rest of the painting. I like taking a white chalk pencil and giving myself a really kind of rough outline of where I might like some of these leaves to be. So make sure that your books down below are nice and dry. And if they're not, give it a little bit of a blast. And I'll leave this little leaf herb. Here, it's on its side, but you get the idea. All right, let's add some leaves onto the ground. 1, 2, 3, kind of 4 main leaves. And I've got this one big leaf kind of leaning. I'm going to do a kind of a center line, like swoop right up the center of this leaf. It's kind of leaning up like this. And it's kind of like a full maple leaf. Now here's like the big part of the leaf. And then I have the second one here, and the third one kind of sticking out here. So on this side. Now the only difference is this side here where the leaf is actually flattened out on the ground and it's kind of curling up here. So instead of, this one's going to be a bit more flat like this. So here's those 3 shapes, big, medium, and small. And then you can kind of, think about the tips, those, pointy shapes coming off of the leaf. But down here, it's just going to kind of ruffle up and almost like flatten onto the ground. So how this might look if I were to paint it in. The first coat, this one's kind of a orangey brown. and like just kind of flattened out. And this side's kind of squished up onto the book. So it's not as perfect as, say, the front on Maple Leaf because it's turning, it's leaning. It's a little bit more of a messy shape, but I think anyone looking at this shape would know, just because we've got big, medium, small, and those veins that we're going to have coming through the leaf, that this is a maple leaf. The most perfect looking maple leaf I put on here was this one here. And if I were to cut the painting in half, this little leaf, so like here's the halfway point right here, it has to fit in this little spot in this little area between this leaf and that one. So this little leaf is kind of on the ground here, and it definitely has that kind of top and the medium points like this. There's another leaf kind of sitting below it. And this one's like a yellow-brown color. So that burnt umber with yellow. There's another leaf kind of sitting right under it, right here, a bit more flat on the ground, a similar shape. And then I have one of those leaves that's kind of curling over itself, like this one. So we see the big part and the little part, but then these two whole leaves are kind of curled right over. This one's more of a dark, that burnt sienna with orange, that dark orange color. This leaf is really kind of curled up on the book here. So we're going to have like a big, medium, and small part to this leaf, but then it's really kind of curled around on itself right here. I want to bring out some of those kind of spikes. For sure. And then down here, got big, medium, small. This leaf is kind of laying back onto the ground. I'm going to take that nice dark yellow ochre color. Kind of one of the spires of the leaf is kind of curled up onto the book. So maple leaf-ish shapes. I see so many classes where they show like this perfect front-on maple leaf, but when we see them in a scene, we're going to see them kind of like leaf litter on the ground, fallen and curled. So this is kind of like the top, and then the medium side. This medium side is curled up onto the book here. We've got to fill in these basic shapes, just like we did with the book and the pumpkin. Don't be afraid of the underpainting part here. Okay. And up here too, I want to add some leaves. I'm going to come into some red, maybe add a bit of brown in it so it's not too vibrant, like a little leaf. I have a red one and a yellow one, and again, just a few little spiky shapes, like this is a leaf that's kind of sticking under the pumpkin. And this one here is going to kind of curl up into the pumpkin. I use burnt sienna for this one, like a dark orange. So kind of curling under the pumpkin. I'm going to do one a yellow color under here, yellow with the brown. And again, just some loose, spiky shapes for now. And finally, I want to have a few more back here. So I have some leaves back here, like they've fallen down. This is almost like the back side of the leaf. A little turned leaf here, a little abstract shape here, and in behind here. I'm going to use some of my red, and there's a little leaf on this shelf that has fallen down. Maybe another one kind of curled up. Just a few little shapes that have that spikiness to them. And maybe a dark burnt sienna leaf back here. This is again kind of like the back of a leaf. Maybe a dark red one here. Like these could even be distant leaves with these colors back in there. So first we have to pull in the base shapes. And we need to do 2 coats on these, just like we did with the books, to really bring them to life, like we did with the books and the pumpkins. So I'm going to give this a blast. We are in a huge rainstorm where I live right now, so it's so humid. My paints are taking forever to dry. All right, let's relax into these final juicy details into our leaves. I want to pull in some veins into the leaf. So grab your zero round brush, and we're going to come into a light color. Instead of pure white, I like using this light kind of parchment color, the yellow ochre, but with lots of white into it. So this really light color. If you remember, this was just white with yellow and brown. Really light. Add some water. We need to have fluid consistency in order to get any kind of like straight line. And I like to think of the veins in these leaves kind of help with the placement. So I'm going to try to come, here's that big center. Okay, remember maple leaf, that big center. Two sides. So then instead of just straight, because this is not a graphic maple leaf, it's one in real life. So this one's kind of all squished up here. There's some, veining that can come up off the main ones as like little V's. But what I really want to do is take a lighter orange color and say, add a few little highlights kind of here, where this part of the leaf is kind of curled up and over. It's like this whole part kind of has folded up and over. And then I might take a little bit of a lighter orange, into some of the tips of this leaf too. Or even just a second coat of the darker orange. So the veins are on there. I'm just kind of pulling a few bits of lighter color. This is the lightest color. I like just pulling a few bits of these lighter colors in the direction of the veins. And sometimes I'll re-add a vein while the color is wet if I think it would look good. So I would consider this leaf finished. You can tweak these leaves for a long time. They were one of my favorite parts to do, but they're the part that I kind of spent the longest playing with, because I wanted them to look loose. I wanted them to look like the perfect kind of autumn color. So this one too, the veining in this leaf is the most close to like the perfect kind of maple leaf, kind of coming up. These little veins like this. I wanted to take a few bits just to make sure that the coat is nice and opaque. And you can mix to get a lot of autumn leaves aren't just like one solid color, are they? If you get a few bits of orange in there too. Maybe pull in a few more bits of that veining. And I would consider this leaf finished. And I want to do a yellow one underneath, but I want it to, this one's like laying flat on the ground. And I want it to be a little bit darker. Just some kind of abstract maple leaf shape. This dark reddish orange one is pretty opaque, so I kind of like it just as it is. But I want to take that lighter version of the orange, or the orangey brown, and put a highlight here, because this is basically the whole other side of the leaf folded over. And to finish it off, I want a bit of that veining in there. Even just a little, kind of showing through. Like it's curled up, so it's like, imagine the stem kind of coming off like here. So I put some veining in. It's looking a little, I don't know that I love the veining, so I might buff some of it out. But I kind of come in and out with the colors, with the highlights. Sometimes I'll add a few like darker bits, like there's little other bits of leaves kind of on the ground. I'm going to do this one here. Another kind of yellowy leaf. I'm going to go for that darker yellowy brown. I could try some veining first. This leaf has a nice kind of direction. It's almost like the perfect maple leaf, but laying a bit more flat. You know, like this was the center. It's basically just laying down. But this one's kind of bending up. This one's bending off. So, you know, this would have like the little veins kind of coming out. And I could pull maybe a little bit of my colors in the direction of the veining. Just a nice little spiky leaf. Now for this one in the distance here, I like to think that this is like the back of a leaf that's fallen. And so just seeing a little bit, I don't want these to be too light. They're kind of off in the distance. So just, you know, a few spiky shapes. Maybe just a little highlight. Maybe just a little pinch of red here. Same thing with these ones in the distance here. This is a red leaf. So I like to take some of that greenish red and add a little bit of white. I want kind of like a reddish, grayish color. So this is the red and the green plus white. Like red and green. We add white to this color. It's this kind of grayed out red. Just has to be lighter than the actual red of the leaf. And let's actually come up to this one here. And I'm just going to pretend it's kind of like this leaf that's curled over. And I'm just going to pull some little spiky bits up. Maybe saturate with the bright red. This is like a leaf that's just totally curled over on itself. Same thing with the yellow one. I'm not going to do anything more than this. Like this one too. It's like this is the stem. And it's almost just like a little boat. Curling up and in with a few of the little spiky shapes. And these ones too. The stem, and maybe a few little highlights. Now the leaves are the final detail into the Autumn Book Club painting. I spent a lot of time just kind of looking at the shapes of these leaves, adding a few little squiggles, adding a few little highlights, and trying to let the abstract shape almost pop out for me. Adding any maple leaf shapes or shape segments with these beautiful colors, slight insinuation of veining is enough to capture that lovely look of autumn leaves. But I do encourage you to just kind of stare at it. In order for a shape to pop out at you, you need to stare at it for a while, or just add one little mark and then stare at it for a little while. Take your time. The colors and shapes are doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. While you're staring at the final painting, now's the time to see if you want to do any little tweaky deakies anywhere else in your project. That can be things like lightening a few of the golden bits in the book, playing with the highlights in your pumpkin, or even playing with the background color. When you're finished, I want you to sit back, relax, and roll your shoulders because you just finished your painting for today. Again, this one has lots of juicy details that you can really lock into. Spend a lot of time looking and just playing with these beautiful autumn colors. And I do hope that you enjoyed painting Autumn Book Club with me today. Just to recap what we've practiced, we worked with shadows, midtones, and highlights to build realistic three-dimensional form while keeping plenty of visible brushwork and a more painterly texture throughout the books, the pumpkins, and most importantly, those scattered, curled up autumn leaves. I would absolutely love to see what you created. So when you're finished, share a photo in the class album over on my website or in our Facebook sharing group. We can all see your work and you can check out what other painters have done as well. Remember, you can come back and enjoy the free replay of this class for the next 7 days. You can tip to own it if you would like lifetime access and keep it forever, or you can also find it inside the Kick Academy, along with more than 650 other detailed painting classes and creative challenges. And if you haven't already, you may also create a free account over on my website. This will keep you up to date with our newest weekend classes, and I do new classes every single weekend. You can ask questions of me directly underneath the tutorials whenever you need a little extra help too. After class, I'm going to label any of the colors that we mixed today. I'll show you what colors went into them, so you can use this as a color mixing guide when you're working along with the project. Again, just give me a few minutes after class to get that ready for you. And again, that will be on the website, and there's a little button called supplementary material under each tutorial. Well, I hope this painting also got you in the spirit for autumn. I know as painters, it's nice to kind of get any of our works done a little bit early so we have them in time for October and November. That's it for me. Take care, and until next time, I hope you keep it colorful.